Welcome. Today we are digging into something that seems, well, completely backwards. It's called the big data paradox. And the idea is that sometimes having more data doesn't just fail to get you the right answer, it can actually make you more confident that you found the right answer when you're dead wrong.
And to really get our heads around this, we have to go back in time. Let's set the scene. It's 1936. The U.S. presidential election is in full swing. And one of the most popular magazines in the country is about to launch the biggest, most ambitious poll in history, convinced its sheer size would make it impossible to get wrong.
But as you've probably guessed, this isn't a story about a stunning success. Oh no. This is a story about a failure. A failure so huge, so spectacular, that it's still the go-to example in statistics textbooks today. So, this magazine, the Literary Digest, sent out millions of mock ballots, and they got back a mind-boggling 2.4 million responses. Now, just to put that in perspective, a typical high-quality national poll today might survey maybe 1,000 people. So 2.4 million? That's just a monumental amount of data.
And the results from this massive poll couldn't have been clearer. It predicted a huge landslide victory for the Republican candidate Alfred Landon. But then, Election Day happened. And the reality? It was the complete opposite. Franklin Delano Roosevelt didn't just win, he absolutely crushed it, taking 46 out of 48 states. It was one of the biggest landslide victories in American history.
So this is the million-dollar question, right? How on earth do you get it that wrong when you have 2.4 million data points? I mean, shouldn't that much data make your prediction practically perfect?
Well, here's the fatal flaw. The problem wasn't the size of their sample, it was who was in it. See, they got their names from three main sources: their own magazine subscriber lists, car registration records, and telephone directories. And you have to remember, this was the middle of the Great Depression. Owning a car or having a telephone were luxuries. This meant their sample was skewed way wealthier than the average American, and those wealthier Americans were much more likely to vote for Landon.
And here's the real kicker. In that very same election, a young up-and-coming pollster, you might have heard of him, George Gallup, he surveyed just 50,000 people, a tiny fraction of the Literary Digest poll. But he was obsessed with getting a representative sample, a mini America. And you know what? He nailed it. He correctly predicted Roosevelt would win. This was the moment everyone learned a crucial lesson. The quality and representativeness of your data is so much more important than the raw quantity.
So, okay, let's fast forward to today. You'd think after a story like that, we'd have learned our lesson for good, right? Well, not exactly. The temptation of big data is so strong that we're making the exact same kind of mistakes, just with new technology.
Let's look at May of 2021. A massive survey run with Facebook was trying to figure out COVID-19 vaccine rates. It reported that 70% of American adults had gotten at least one shot. But the official data from the CDC showed the real number was only 53%. That's a 17 percentage point overestimation. That's not just a little off, that's a gigantic error that could lead to really bad public health decisions.
And this gets us right to the heart of what Harvard statistician Zhao Li Meng calls the big data paradox. See, when a dataset gets huge, it does a great job of getting rid of random noise, which makes us feel really confident in the result. But here's the trap. If there's a fundamental bias in how you collected the data, a bigger dataset doesn't fix it. It just amplifies the bias. It makes you more and more sure of the wrong answer.
And believe me, this Facebook survey was big. We're talking about 250,000 responses coming in every single week. With a number that huge, you'd think the margin of error would be basically zero, wouldn't you?
Wrong again, because the sample was biased. Just like in 1936, some people were more likely to respond than others. In this case, it turned out that people who were vaccinated were more likely to take the survey. So because of that bias, the survey's real statistical power, what they call its effective sample size, was just a shadow of its actual size.
In fact, are you ready for this? When researchers adjusted for all the biases in that survey of 250,000 people, they found it had the same statistical power as a perfect, totally random, unbiased sample of fewer than 10 people. I'm not kidding, that's not a typo. A 250,000-person survey was basically less useful than asking 9 random people on the street. It's just wild.
So what exactly are these biases? These invisible gremlins that can completely wreck even the biggest datasets? Let's break down a few of the main culprits.
First, you've got the big one we've already talked about, sampling bias. This is the classic Literary Digest problem. The group of people you're actually studying doesn't look like the group of people you want to be talking about. As you can see here, their sample was just not representative of the wider population.
Then you have something called ascertainment bias. This happens all the time in healthcare. Think about it. Data from electronic health records only includes people who actually went to the doctor. Healthy people who never go are completely invisible. This can make it seem like diseases are way more common than they really are, because you're only looking at a pool of people who are already seeking care.
And that leads to a related problem, which is just plain old data quality. Even for the people in your dataset, the information might be incomplete or just wrong. One researcher brilliantly called the data in electronic health records a cartoon of the patient. It's a simplified, distorted sketch that leaves out all the important context.
You might also hear this called a Swiss cheese quality. The data is just full of holes. And here's the critical part. Those holes are almost never random. For example, maybe data is systematically missing for certain demographic groups, which sneakily introduces another layer of bias you have to worry about.
Okay, so all of this brings us back to one simple, powerful idea. When it comes to data, representativeness beats size every single time. A small, carefully collected, representative dataset is almost always better than a giant, messy, biased one. And this table just lays it out perfectly. Look at the parallels here. In 1936, the huge but biased Literary Digest poll got it wrong, while Gallup's small but representative poll got it right. Fast forward to 2021. The huge but biased Facebook poll got it wrong, while a tiny little Axios Ipsos poll of just 1,000 people, who were carefully chosen to be representative, got the vaccine numbers almost spot on. It's the same story, just 85 years apart. So, where does that leave us? What's the big takeaway here? In our modern world, where we are absolutely drowning in data, the goal shouldn't just be to get bigger and bigger data sets. The goal has to be to get smarter.
And if there's one rule to remember, it's this. Invest in data quality way more than you invest in data quantity. A beautiful, clean, well-designed study is worth so much more than a messy data dump, no matter how big it is.
Now, the good news is that the experts know this is a huge problem, and the path forward is pretty clear. It's about, first, just admitting that bias exists. Then it's about actually investing in good study design from the start. And finally, it's about developing really clever statistical methods to find and correct for the biases that you just can't get rid of.
So I want to leave you with a question that you can use as a tool. The next time you read a headline that boasts about a study with millions of data points, I want you to pause and ask yourself the most important question. Don't ask, how big was the data? Ask, how was it collected and who was left out? That's where the real story is.